Before I start this one, it is extremely important that you get a family history of anybody who had diabetes in your family. That includes not just your immediate family, but your grandparents, your uncles, etc. on both sides. Now, if you don't have that, again, it's important to go to the doctor every 6 months so they can actually do a glucose profile. So let's take my situation, my case, if you will. I'm just going to focus on the glucose, etc., and then I'll get to the backstory. Here you can see this is called your glucose, your blood sugar, and this is called A1C. Put that up a little bit. So here you can see my average glucose before May, that's in June, was around 218 or so, which is very high. And you can see here's 120 is the normal, and you can see the effect of it on your A1C levels, which was 9.1 or whatever. So way above normal. This is with diabetes for sure. Again, I said I didn't know I had it, so let that go. Basically represents what I didn't know I had it when I was hospitalized. This is kind of the next level. I'm still high, but you can see that the A1C is actually dropping too. So how did it drop this level? So you almost dropped 2 points. That's pretty significant. It's still unhealthy, but it's significant progress. Well, this predominantly was medication. Okay, they have medications, obviously, insulin. So in the hospitals, it depends on which one, but generally speaking, if you have a glucose of around 150, they will, anything more than that, they will give you insulin. Okay, if it's 149 or below, they will not give you insulin, and there's a reason behind that. It means maybe you can control it a little bit. So you're starting to see a little bit of like, well, how does it drop? Can your body kind of take care of it a little bit? So medications, there's various ones. They're just, the metformin is probably the most common one, as designed to control diabetes. There's others, but that's probably the most common one. And anyway, those are medical ways of dropping it. Insulin, obviously, and metformin for more of a long-term use. So there's the number of the drop. So then you can see this, by the way, this came from the hospital. You can see that from this point to basically from July to November, I was able to get it down further because I was already on these medications. How was I able to do that? Well, I figured out how to do it, and I'll give you the basics but not the details. So I went from a 7 to a 5.5. 5.5 is considered pretty good. It's not the best, but it's really good for someone who's diabetic. When my several doctors saw that, they were kind of perplexed as to how it went down so fast. You gotta understand, this 5.5 was a 3-month average. Okay, so while I had an average of 115, they didn't understand maybe how I was able to do it. What it looked like, without pulling on a bunch of graphs, I'd rather show you in a spreadsheet or a table. Now, I was going to be in the medical community, and I blew the whistle, so I have a little bit of a clinical background, but I never made it to a certain level. Okay, so with that said, I had to learn by myself, because they do not teach this stuff, believe it or not. This is kind of out there, but it's not taught. It's not taught in the nutritional community. It's not taught in the medical community. So I'm going to kind of give it to you here quick. Now this does not apply to everyone. Okay, so what do I mean by that? What might increase your glucose level may not increase my glucose level to the same extent. So if you can handle rice, then you can handle rice. If you can handle corn chips, then you can handle corn chips. If you can handle juice, then juice, you can have it. What I mean by handling means having it spike too much. It's not only just carbohydrates which causes your blood to spike sugar. It's also the type of carbohydrate, and the type, not type of in general, but it could be, again, specific. Corn, could be rice, could be juice. Something can spike your sugar. Obviously sugar is going to spike your sugar, so that's maybe universal. But so with this said, this is a graph of what I was not taught, which is that if you bring your if you bring your sugar down, the triglycerides follow. I did an experiment on myself many years ago for my nutrition teacher, talking many years ago, and because there was so much controversy in the medical community about sugar, about cholesterol, about fat, triglycerides. So fat and triglycerides are basically the same. With that said, I did an experiment. I went on Atkins diet, which was no sugar, and I went on a no fat diet for like 3 to 6 months each time. The data I collected, which I don't have right now, focusing on triglycerides, was that my triglycerides were 180 when I was on a non-fat diet. Now think about that. When my sugar I was loaded with sugar, but no fat, why would my triglycerides go up? Because technically you're not inhaling, you're not ingesting fat. So then I went on the Atkins diet, and my triglycerides went to 80. So a 100-point drop just from going from no sugar, from having a lot of sugar to no sugar. That's when I knew something was amiss. There's something wrong in the way things are promoted. So therefore, it is clear that when you drop your sugar, you're going to drop your triglycerides, with the exception of certain families, genetics, have high triglycerides anyway. So it may not be as affected, but maybe it'll help. All right. The other thing that no one mentioned was HDLs tend to increase a little bit when your tris go down. So you have a cascade effect. For sure, the relationship between sugar and triglycerides is there. The HDLs are a little different. Now, I'm not going to get too much in it here, but the HDL is considered a quote good cholesterol. I'll leave it at that. So here you see the numbers. In the beginning, this is the history I've had. When I was a kid, 124 was considered pre-diabetic range, but don't worry about it. Now they worry about it, because when you have that number, you have potential of getting diabetes. Now, I lived with that for years. My diabetes came on strong, like within 3 years. Like, boom, I had it for 3 years, and it was extraordinarily high. So, and that's because I didn't go to the doctor to get that test. If I had a simple glucose test, it would have been, boom, you have diabetes, we need to get that under control. And then my situation may not have happened, or would have been delayed. I think it would have been delayed, but not much more than that. So here you see it. Average A1C is around 6 or 5.9. So this is okay, pre-diabetic, if you will. However, should be watched. Nowadays, it's watched. Notice the tries, 80 to 180. So again, that had to do with the different, 80 was the one when I was on Atkins, 180 was the one when I was on no fat. We'll say let's go to May 21. So I was in the emergency room with various severe conditions. 9.4 was my A1C. That means my average sugar or glucose. Glucose again is body sugar, so I'm going to use that more. My average body sugar glucose was 222, which is extremely high for an average. Now you understand body sugar goes up and down, up and down, and up and down. But holding at that's way too high. And again, part of it was I didn't know I had diabetes, or it ran in my family. 2, it was I haven't gone to the doctor in like 3 years. So note my triglyceride level, 438. That's extraordinarily high. Again, it's related to the sugar. The HDLs was a little bit lower. Now again, this is kind of a side effect, a thing of the tries. Not a huge thing, but these are definitely related. So then came that's May, that's June. My numbers started coming down. So A1C was 7 and 157. So that's the history with the warning. That was red because it was severe. This is still not good, so we're still not out of the zone. And then all of a sudden, here you got November, and basically I was on meds and I was doing very little carbs. So really, that's what did it. Very little carbs. And then my number came down from 5 to 5.5 in a matter of, 6 months. And that's why people were kind of shaking their heads a little bit when they saw my situation. You can see the average glucose 110, and then look at the tries, 112. Now, that is also directly related to fenofibrate. Fenofibrate is a medication that drops your triglycerides. At this time, I was in a lot of meds, and even here I was in a lot of meds too. But I bring up the fenofibrate because that directly targets the tries. Eventually it was 109 for the fenofibrate, and eventually I basically said I was willing to stay on it. That I didn't. Just a note about medication quickly. As a doctor said to me, medication can be poison to some people. And you need to understand that. And doctors need to understand that, which they don't. But this doctor was humble enough to say that. Certain meds are not, everybody is not cookie cutter genetics. They're not the same. So what may work with one person may be a poison to another. And I use that word strongly because I'm not going to get into it, but there was an event that may have happened just because of medication, which was worse than all my other conditions. And I took the medications because it was in a situation, it was in dire need and I'll get in the backstory on that one. So here I came off the fenofibrate. Now if you notice, the tries start to go back up. Okay. Now again, here we got a low of 31 HDL, with the exception of these two, and there's a reason for that. These are HDL numbers, 35. So there's a 4 point. So here, I'm just gonna, the main point here is you can see the triglycerides and the relationship between glucose and the triglycerides. So not only does this impact people who have diabetes, but this also impacts people who have high triglycerides. So in other words, someone might not have diabetes, but maybe eat too much sugar. Way to get your triglycerides down is to stop eating so much sugar. Okay. And that's really it. Just a footnote on these numbers here. The nutritionist had a point, and I try to listen to everybody and give everybody their due in the medical community, including nutritionists and allied health. And in this case, I try to give her her due. So in other words, what she was saying is, while I was doing massive supplementation in addition to medication, some vitamins and supplements are best derived from food. And if you, for example, don't eat enough blueberries or berries, where instead you get it in the form of supplement, yeah, you're missing out a little bit on nature's natural ability. When you think of supplements, think of concentrated amounts of a particular thing that something in nature already provides. That's the best way of thinking of a supplement. They are effective and needed in certain cases. I'm not going to go into the whole nutrient thing, but I will say in quick, some suggest because of various factors, we are not getting enough nutrition, period, even from our food. Okay, so, and that's not without reason. So that's another reason why people supplement. Other reasons is, I'll leave this as an example. I knew someone who was in the hospital for 2 years with a kidney disease, and they kept, again, Western medication, they keep meds. She wasn't able to, she kept getting sick. Her friend said, well, try this. And it was a form of juicing. And juicing is a way of getting natural vitamins into your system. And also, you have normal flora in your digestive system. And it was able to maybe able to ingest, so to speak, and utilize those nutrients. And she ended up juicing herself out of the hospital, and she never went back, as far as I know. And she's anyway, she's doing fine. I haven't seen her in years. So, but why I mention that is because sometimes we need what's in food. So that was a long story, but the point is, I started eating some carbohydrates and try introducing them in the forms of juice or blueberries, strawberries, things like that. And it caused a little bit of a spike, but mostly it affected the HDL, I believe. And you can see a little bit of a spike here in the triglycerides, which I think is reflective from those fruits. Here's the backstory here. On May 23rd, I believe, I was diagnosed with strokes. My right carotid is completely clogged. It's gone. However, your body has a way of providing blood flow to that area by way of collateral branches and also by retrograde black flow. Now, not only did I have these strokes, but I also had what they found to be originally 50 to 79% occlusion in one of my arteries in my heart. They got in there and they found it 95% occluded. So I have stents. I have stents on my left side and my stents in my heart. Now, why do I get these, so many of them, so young? There are other people who have diabetes who don't have that extreme situation. Well, the reality is genetics. Everyone kept telling me it's your genetics. So again, look at the history of your family. Does your family have any strokes? Does your family have any heart attacks that came early? And again, it's good to know, because if you don't know, you're going blind. Whereas before, now you can kind of prepare, maybe allow things to open up a little bit. And this is why I'm doing this in part, is to make sure that you may not experience this, so keep those arteries as open as possible, without getting into the details again of what I experienced. So that's what happened to me. That's the backstory. I was in the hospital, I don't know how many times, probably maybe 8 or 9 times in 2 years. That's in the emergency room. There's other issues, but those are the main ones. So obviously I was concerned, like, how did that happen? Why wasn't that, known to me? Diabetes is one aspect, but genetics is the biggest aspect. So, now with that said, I want to keep these arteries open as much as possible. And that's why you start to talk about diabetes. The biggest, now they're talking about inflammatory chemicals, referring to the body's inflames the arteries, basically. One thing that inflames the arteries is basically sugar. Your blood sugar. I'm not getting into the whole insulin and insulin resistance thing. It's a little bit more complicated. I'm trying to keep it simple. What I want to leave you with is just this. If you basically think of two things. One is let's say you have 100% of cells, the beta cells producing insulin when you're young. But in time, you start to lose those cells, maybe in your, progressively to a point where, you shouldn't be drinking sugary drinks maybe around the age of 45. Maybe because you only have 70% or 75% of the cells. And then maybe when you're in your 50s, you start to get like 50%. So when you're doing sugary drinks, you don't have enough insulin to stop that glucose in your blood. So one is you got to stop the sugary stuff. Okay, so that's pretty simple. Most people know that. Some people can't. That's the problem. There's ways to modify it. Okay, you don't have to completely throw things out. But I'm not, again, that's, if you want to talk about that, we can talk about that on the link. The second thing is exercise. When your blood sugar goes up in the morning, it naturally does, it makes sense to exercise right away to get it right down. Okay? So, unless you know by way of strips, poking yourself, or getting meters, whatever type that reads your blood sugar, you're not going to know. So, if you start exercising in the morning right away, and what I mean by exercise, 20 minutes, then you'll be fine. If you eat a big meal, by the way, when I say big meal, when you have a lot of, let's say you're a chicken guy, you love barbecue chicken, when you have a ton of proteins, that will also cause your blood sugar to go up. It may have nothing to do with the barbecue sauce in there. Part it does, but it's the chicken, it's the protein that your body utilizes. Your protein is a sugar, and it spikes your sugar. Okay, a slower way. So if you think of like putting sugar down your mouth or other carbohydrates, spiking sugar, a ton of chicken, that'll be like more of a medium spike and a long-term spike. Fat does nothing. So there's that, and then the sugar, and then the exercise after you eat. Maybe go for a walk for 20 minutes, and maybe 20 minutes later, because it gets down your sugar. How come? Well, I don't know what it is about walking as opposed to other exercises, but walking, it doesn't have to be fast either. Walking gets rid of the sugar because you're utilizing your muscles. Obviously, swimming and other things, biking and all this other stuff. I'm not saying don't do that. I'm just saying walking seems to be really good because it utilizes, particularly the gastroc, I think, is affecting the sugar levels. But anyway, you're moving, your calf muscle. You're utilizing, your quads, all your movement. You're losing all your muscles, and it basically sucks the sugar out of your bloodstream, the glucose, and therefore it lowers your glucose sugar. Okay, so those are the two basics ideas, and I hope you have a great